So, if you haven't gotten a ticket to SpoilerCon yet, now is the time. If you're listening to this in real time, this is the right moment. We've got a great lineup of guests. We've got a great group of people already showing up. If you've been putting it off, if you think we're thinking maybe I can buy it later or I can get the tickets right beforehand, you're running out of time. Now's the time to get a ticket. Let us know if you're coming to SpoilerCon. Go now. Buy the ticket. It would help us out a lot.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
We are here today to discuss
The First Cup.
Chapter 30. And I don't know why it's called The First Cup. I'm confused like the first cup of tea that gets handed to her as a proper Aes Sedai.
She's now, because she is handed the first cup because she is the most powerful, right? Like,
no, you're right.
She goes to hand the cups out, and Elayne doesn't even ask for one, but she's handed the first one because she is the most powerful. Because once she declares, I am Aes Sedai, and they say, yes, you are, then the tea is handed out according to rank and power.
So that's, okay. I just read the chapter, and I'm looking at the title like, I don't understand. But no, you're totally right. That's exactly what that's about.
For a second, I was thinking, like the Cup of Hogwarts, the first, but in a lot of ways, that is, like, you get a trophy, and a lot of times that trophy is a cup or a chalice or a mug. And so this is sort of, she is handed literally the trophy of congratulations, you have won being an Aes Sedai. Here you go.
You've won at the out-egoing of these
exactly.
proud women.
and the lucky bit of having genetics that makes her more powerful. Like, literally have more of the one power at her disposal. And that is sort of the secret into why one of the reasons they obey her.
Mm-hmm.
You have been set above us in yourself.
Right. Yeah, you've got two reasons to get this deference, and we've been giving you respect on neither front.
But Elayne only knows about one of them, which I think is entertaining. She demands respect on one front and gets it on two.
Yeah, which is fun, because she's sitting there like, what? I'm not qualified for this. Yes, I'm qualified for this. It's fine. It's fine. I'm not going to let my confusion show, which is hilarious. And the symbol for this is the cloverleaf snake, either because we've got dark friends or because we've got Moghedien, or both.
It's usually I think of it as a Forsaken snake. It's almost always associated with Forsaken. Occasionally with the Black Oddjaw, but then usually we get the two-faced symbol.
Right, and we don't really have any dark friend shenanigans in this. We have a dark friend sister, but she's not doing anything nefarious. So yeah, it's got to be because Moghedien is setting us up for the Mashiara next chapter.
Because we see Moghedien balefire Nyneave, or attempt to, yeah.
But yeah, that's where we're going today. I can read us in.
Do you want to really nail that whiny tone that Elayne's starting off with?
I can try. Chapter 30, The First Cup, and our symbol is the Forsaken snake. I do not understand this, Elayne protested. She had not been offered a chair. In fact, when she started to sit, she had been told curtly to remain standing. 5 sets of eyes were focused on her. 5 women with set, grim faces. You are behaving as if we've done something terrible, when what we have done is find the bowl of the winds. Stomping foot. At least they were on the brink of it, she hoped. The message Nyleesian had come running back with was none too clear. Matt had gone off shouting that he had found it. Or something very like, Nyleesian allowed. The longer he talked, the more he bounced between absolute certainty and doubt. Birgitta had remained watching Rianne's house. She seemed to be sweaty and bored. In any case, matters were in motion. Elayne wondered how Nyneave was getting on. Better than herself, she hoped. She had certainly never expected this when she revealed their success. I can do a good whine.
That was really good, yeah. That's my headcanon Elayne voice from now on.
Well, I mean, it is a very unfair situation that she's in. Like, she's being berated up one side and down another for coming to them with success. Like, the indignity is very well-founded. Or indignation.
But they're saying, you've discovered something we already knew and revealed secrets that we didn't want the kin to know we knew about them.
Right. And she's like, You need to tell me the things to not communicate before I can fail to communicate.
Until I stumble them into myself. But, the reason these aren't told is, of course, the Aes Sedai think of Elayne and Nyneave as accepted.
Right.
And you never tell an accepted about the kin, because that's the secret to catching them if they run away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it makes you realize what they think about Elayne and Nyneave is they could still be runaways, right? Like, they could still...
Right. And I mean, also, there's the whole, like, none of this is being done properly. Nobody's thinking about inducting them properly. Like, just everything is in turmoil. Like, the last thing that anyone's thinking about is reading them into the 475,000 things that you get to learn upon being raised to the Shawl. It's like, we'll get to that once we've resolved the tower. It's, whatever.
They haven't earned it. They haven't, as far as these Aes Sedai are considered, they haven't taken the test. They haven't sworn the oaths. They're not Aes Sedai.
Right?
Yeah. Even, that's that prejudice, whether they're thinking that to themselves and realistically, they know they have to obey the Amyrlin. They know the Amyrlin's word is law. They know the Amyrlin can raise, kind of? I would be interested to see an actual debate between Aes Sedai, like maybe Grey Aja, about, like, does the Amyrlin have the power to raise someone to Amyrlin's seat?
By decree.
By decree.
Yeah, raising someone by decree is presumably something that has never happened in the Tower's history or has happened very rarely. It's certainly not something we ever get reference to having happened before. And it kind of makes sense that Egwene would do it, given how she was raised, but it's still, like, circumventing their entire system.
Yeah. And Elida specifies that the Amyrlin seat in particular has this sort of loophole, right? The Amyrlin seat is Aes Sedai.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't say that the Amyrlin seat has to be Aes Sedai before she becomes that. So by being raised Amyrlin seat, she becomes Aes Sedai. So there is that sort of by decree version of it, because it is written into the law as a bit of a loophole. But there's nothing like that for anyone else.
Yeah, there's just the whole, like, what the Amyrlin says is law now, but it's not something that normally works.
It's a very interesting society, because you do have this sort of dictator ruled over by a council who can declare anything, but at the same time, like, there's this set of raw laws and rules that everybody has to follow.
Mm-hmm.
When can the Amyrlin override the raw laws and rules? It seems like whenever she wants to, except when the Hall stops her from doing it.
Yeah, which Egwene, very neatly slipped that decree of raising 4 sisters through at a moment when the Hall really couldn't say no.
Right, so, and that's where you can definitely see the Aes Sedai of the White Tower like that. Yeah, that's insane. That doesn't make any sense. You can't do that.
Right, yeah, and I mean, that's the other problem with, like, ruling by decree is, like, it only works if the people who obey you enthusiastically. If they obey you only in the letter of the law, they can drag it out to being meaningless, and that's what's been happening with Nyneave and Elayne, is they're being, yes, Aes Sedai, but they're not being treated as Aes Sedai.
We also see the problem with ruling by decree with Egwene when she dies.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, we have all these treaties, all these agreements, all these plans that she was going to do. Are they going to happen? Is Godswain going to follow up? There's a certain amount of, well, they made bargains with Egwene.
Yeah.
Right? The Sea Folk, the Aiel, right? Like, what's going to happen when she's dead? That isn't the question. Is Godswain going to follow up with that kind of stuff? And that's the problem. Because it's done by decree, it becomes a question rather than something that's just policy by the Tower.
Yeah, it's extremely fragile. It works for speed, but it's really fragile if the personality holding it together is taken out by unfortunate events.
Which is why I think you need to be able to balance those things, right? You need both a slower legislative process and a quicker executive process, if you want to talk in U.S. terms and then a judicial process, if you want to throw that in there to make to rule over the disagreements between the two of them. That it makes sense from that perspective, but the problem is when those branches start to fight rather than work together.
Or if people just decide to go their own way because they don't like the leadership, which is, more or less what's been happening with this group of Aes Sedai, is they're like, we're not into this. And so, yeah, they're really mad at Elayne for not playing along with her half Aes Sedai status, basically. They're like, you're supposed to behave as an accepted. And she's like, but I don't believe I'm an accepted. And they're like, but we do. And it's a contest of wills, basically. But she wins.
She does. Well, because I don't think the others realize they're playing a game. They judge her like an accepted who's run away, which, of course, if you think an Aes Sedai is an accepted and treat her like one, she's going to violate your rules.
Mm-hmm.
And especially the secret that you didn't tell her about. Like, it's a little bit of a ridiculous situation.
The Aes Sedai being ridiculous? What?
I know. But what's interesting to me is, despite all of that, she probably would have taken it, except for the letter from Jaichim Carridin.
Mm-hmm. Because she's had the shortest freaking apprenticeship of anyone other than Egwene and Nyneave. Like, nobody gets raised to Aes Sedai in 2 years. That's not a thing that happens in the system. So she very much does have uncertainty around being only 18. One of the, quickest runs through novice ship ever, spending a huge amount of her training time outside the tower anyway. Like, she knows that she's not really an Aes Sedai in the sense that the others are, just by virtue of experience. Like, It's only because she gets so pissed off. Because, otherwise she totally would just take it and fight with them and continue to treat it as a game. But then Carridin pisses her off so much, she's like, all right, fuck this. I'm taking it seriously now.
I'm not playing the game anymore. Yeah. And why do you think the letter is delivered by the Queen? Is it just that Jaichim Carridin went to the Queen and said, get this to her as quickly as possible?
Yeah, it's probably a flex, yeah.
Just like, because he's the real power. He's got all that power, and the Queen, Tylan, is not powerful.
Yeah, he can. And, Carridin is operating under extreme pressure from multiple sides that are threatening his life. He has zero time to fuck around.
Yeah, that's right. He did get the command from Patron Nile to kidnap her and bring her back.
Yeah, and arguably it's the least important of the things that are pushing on him, but, he's a rat in a cage. He's just trying to find any escape out. So I think that that's why it was just like, oh, this is the fastest way to move this plot forward. I will take it.
Mm-hmm. And he's not lying. That's the thing, is, there's not a single lie in that entire... you may reach your mother's side in safety and all speed. I don't know about safety.
Yeah, that's all the respect you deserve, kind of wording.
Exactly. Although, I do think he wants to use her as a pawn, so he wouldn't hurt her. And he does want to get there fast to be used, right? So safety and speed, sure, he's not lying.
She would have been psychologically terrorized to make her pliant by the time she got there.
Right,
but
right.
She wouldn't have been stabbed,
But yeah, freaking Boris, man.
Such a fucking clown.
This isn't the letter he was writing when he crushed the ants, right?
No, that was a report to Nile.
That's right. But yeah, the pride of 1,000 years of Andorran queens put steel into her backbone, and that's really what gets her going.
Mm-hmm. Though before that, she was thinking about how maybe if Avienda doesn't say she's met Toe sufficiently soon, she'll see if Matt beating her will discharge the Toe. So she's a little bit ready to boil over just from
That's
thinking
fair.
about
Matt.
Yeah, the first the Aes Sedai, then Matt, then the Aes Sedai again, then this fucking note, and it's she's up there. But yeah, the pride of 1,000 years of being royalty. Arguably, her house she's not from an unbroken line of queens, but culture, it's fine.
Andor has had queens for 1,000 years,
right? And she's been raised in a tradition of taking them as her direct ancestors.
And she's going to be the next one in that line of queens. But no, she's not descended directly from all of them. Although, I guess she does have connections back to the original, right?
Yeah, but it moves between houses, right? Trakand has had the throne and then not had the throne, and
Hey, it's all one big happy family.
They're all cousins.
It's all cousins. And Rand is so happy about that fact.
Awkward.
Oh God, I want to fuck my cousin. Oh no. No, she's not. She's not really your cousin. She's just
political cousin, not biological cousin. Yeah, because over 1,000 years, that'd be some hella inbreeding.
The English royal family would like to say hello.
Royal families of Europe are. I learned a lot about that when I listened to Queen Victoria, narrated by Kate Redding. That's a really cool book that her and Michael Kramer did with their new company, where they're not doing it by contract; they're just doing it on their own with free copyright stuff, and that's a good book. I recommend everyone listen to it. But yes, I learned exactly how few ancestors were involved in coming up to Queen Victoria. It's you're literally all second cousins at this point. And then she has a zillion children who marry a bunch of their second cousins, and it's just wow. But that's European tradition going back I don't even know how many centuries. So
what's Rudy Giuliani's excuse?
He's actually a demon from another dimension with a underpaid makeup team.
I love this paragraph starting with "I am Aes Sedai." Will you read that whole thing?
I will try. Pull that wine back down. I am Aes Sedai. The words came out like winter stone, and Elayne meant them to. Carridin's lies, and these women. Morel threatened to slipper her. They would acknowledge her rightful place as a sister. She and Nyneave had found the bowl, as good as, anyway, and the arrangements for its use were underway. You proposed to punish me for endangering a secret apparently only known to sisters, but no one bothered to tell me the secret when I attained the shawl. You suggest punishing me like a novice or accepted, but I am Aes Sedai. I was raised to the shawl by Egwene Alvir, the Amerlin you claim to serve. If you deny that Nyneave and I are Aes Sedai, then you deny the Amerlin seat who sent me to find the Bowl of the Winds, which we have done. I will not have it. I call you to account, Morel Candivwin. Submit to the will of the Amerlin seat, or I will call judgment on you as a rebellious traitor.
After so long, that speech is catharsis. Just absolutely, I call judgment on you as a rebellious traitor.
Mm-hmm.
These women finally are confronted with their own power structure and realizing they are not on top.
Yeah, no, Elaine's been playing the role, being the teenager, and suddenly she's like, oh, did I mention I'm actually a woman of great power? Because I am. It's and the way Kate delivers it in the audiobooks is just, I tried really hard not to literally imitate her exact intonation, but it's a really well delivered thing.
If you're working in an office and you're getting shit done, and then you have a meeting and there's people who are like arguing with you, you're like, listen, I'm in charge of this project, I've done all the work, here's the solution, shut up and get in line. Like, it's sort of that sort of really satisfying feeling. Not that I've ever done it, but I've imagined doing that.
I have never been in that position personally. Definitely have wanted to say things. Have done it once or twice through email, but it's not quite the same as doing it in spoken form.
You have to be eminently confident and competent to pull this off.
Right.
You have to be both better at the people around you at what you're doing, be aware that you're better at what you're doing than the people around you, and be empowered.
Yeah. It's
a
lot.
That's a lot. And there's a reason why it takes a couple of books to set this up.
Like we said before, it's really Carridin sets her over the edge. Because, I think that if she was a little bit more in her own right mind, she would have more of the imposter syndrome, holding her back. But
I'm trying to figure out if there's any Taviran-ness in that letter. But it was... Carridin didn't write it in response to Matt. He wrote it in response to Pedro Niles' message.
Which arrived before he had that moment with Matt sparking his brain. So yeah, I think this is pure coincidence or a very, very long form Taviran twisting because the bowl needs a unified group of Aes Sedai. But that has as much to do with the sea folk and with how Matt handles the sea folk as with this situation. I think this is really just character growth for the sake of character growth.
Fair enough. It could just be the last straw, right? Not necessarily that it was timed exactly, but something would have been the last straw. Whether it was the women pushing her, whether it was Jaichim Carridin's letter, whether it was just Nyneave tugging her braid at her one more time. Something like that would have set her off, and she would have had the same speech no matter what.
She's been thinking about the fact that her mother's dead for a long time. She knows she has to go take the throne, and she's in charge of finding the fix to climate change. At some point, she's going to get fed up with being treated like a child. She knows she has these big adult responsibilities, and she's willing to do them. Something was going to set her off. I agree. And it makes sense that she would grow and would snap because character growth is a thing that actually happens in this series in a believable way.
And I love this. Just the whole rest of this sentence is while you think quietly on what else I should be told as an Aes Sedai, Adelius and Van Dien will instruct me in this secret I endangered. It's just so good.
You
sit.
You know what you did.
And I like this. There's a bit of this bargaining. Tom and her mother both said you must begin by asking for 10 to get 1. And she's just trying to get acknowledged. And so she's like, you do exactly what I say. And she's expecting that they're going to push back and be like, we're not going to do what you're saying. She's like, but you do acknowledge that I am Aes Sedai, right? And they'll be like, yeah. So she's only expecting an acknowledgement. And instead, she breaks through and just becomes the unopposed, declared leader of the group.
Right. Which, like, arguably Nyneave would be more the leader, except that Nyneave is a mess and naturally defers to Elayne. So
Nyneave has no leadership skills whatsoever.
No. And she's about to be very distracted because Lan is about to happen. And she's a complete airhead for a book and a half until she gets through the honeymoon phase a little bit.
She's also sort of just, like, constrained.
Well, she still has her block at this point, right? She's really, like, struggling with that.
Well, I'm talking about, like, for the next book and a half.
Yeah.
Obviously, like, she loses her block here.
Yeah, Nynaeve's not ready for leadership, even though she has the raw strength for it. She still has a lot of growth and self-introspection to do, which starts with breaking her block and then moves into dealing with Lan and his problems. And then she comes through it and has her whole will he ride alone moment. And, you know, she gets through it. Yeah, she's nowhere near ready to take power, and the only person who she has to argue with about that is Elayne, and she just wants to defer to Elayne because Elaine's more rational than her, at least with respect to the other Aes Sedai.
Well, and Elayne is schooled in leadership. You know, she grew up learning how to be a leader and learning how to
manage
that's a better word, manage people into doing, because people want to be managed, right? Who doesn't want to be part of an effective group with a quality leader, right? Like,
yeah, most people would rather follow a competent leader than be a competent leader or a leader of any sort. We actually like being part of a team more than we like being lone actors or at the top.
And being at the top is so hard. Like, I've seen so many, like, restaurant owners drive themselves nuts while everybody else is doing just fine and making a ton of money, and they're just, like, broke and killing themselves because they're the leaders, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, being, like, second or third in command to someone who knows what the fuck they're doing is a way more comfortable spot. You can just lean into your strengths and let them worry about the big picture.
Thank you, Telmanus.
Right.
So the next thing we get is a bit of a history of the kin.
Yeah, info dump.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of this you want to go into, because I feel like we've touched on it so many times in so many different places.
Yeah, there's a little bit of world building with the series of cities and the history of Abu Dar. You know, Barashta is where the Rahad now stands. So we just get that kind of like general world building. And then we get a reminder of the disconnect between the tower thinks that the kin take in wilders. And Elaine's like, but that was like their biggest concern was making sure that we weren't wilders. So we learned that there's secrets left to be uncovered.
There's a little bit here where she says, none ever remained long. 5 years, perhaps 10, I suppose. Once they realized their group was no replacement for White Tower, they go off and become village healers or wisdoms of the lake. And yes, they do that, but they maintain... She thinks that all the red belts that have gone off to live other lives aren't part of the organization anymore.
Yeah, they vanish, so to speak. Yeah, into the organization.
Exactly.
They only know about the population of the kin that is most recently picking up people and working on that, and then they vanish, and the tower thinks that they vanish from this entire structure, and no, the structure's just really good at hiding them.
And giving them alternate identities, and having them live 3 or 4 different lives with 3 or 4 different trades.
Right, yeah, because they have to be kind of like vampires, right? Like, you can't be a 150-year-old lacquerware trader. Like, people will start to wonder why you don't age. You have to, like, age out, go live at the farm for 10 years, and then go to a different village, and, like, you know, people have to die off and forget that you were there. Like, this is literally how vampires have to hide, right? In so many stories. That's, like, a huge part of their arc.
And you have to learn a new skill, because you can't go back to doing what you used to do. You can't be like, oh, I'm my own... Oh, I guess Zareen kind of tried to pull that one. I'm my own granddaughter.
A little bit. But yeah, there's talk later.
Not Zareen. What was her name?
Zarya.
Zarya.
But yeah, that's like, yeah, they end up having like multiple careers. They really know their shit at that point. Because it's like, oh yeah, I was a fur trader, and I was a lacquerware trader, and I was a ship captain, and like they're able to like live multiple lives, often with the same name, because they don't have like the internet to database this stuff together. But yeah, you have to go away and reinvent yourself. And that's part of why they don't allow marriage, right? Is because your husband and children will give the lie to your story pretty thoroughly, especially like, yeah, a husband and children, you know. I guess if you married another one of the kin, you'd be fine. But yeah, if you have children and then you outlive them without aging in the slightest, that's gonna raise some questions. Yeah, and so they talk about how despite having an organization, they do what we want them to do. And the reason that the tower keeps them around is because of the runaways. And we get the little bit about the Daughters of Silence.
Yeah, because we think that may be where Codswain's
mentor came from.
And Paralysis.
Yeah, right. Mentor and Terangrial. That could have been through that. And I think we also thought that maybe, or no, we know canonically that one of the people trained by the Daughters of Silence ends up going to the tower and becoming a sister. Yes, Saren. Thank you, Nicholas, in chat. Saren actually was taken in when the Daughters of Silence was broken up. Saren was one of the Wilders who had been found and trained. She gets taken to the tower and actually ends up making it all the way to the Shawl, which is cool.
Well, and we do know that the Daughters of Silence were a former accepted, which means they could have stolen the Paralysis Net from the tower in the first place.
Mm-hmm. And it was only 200 years ago, so it's well within the lifespans of our older Aes Sedai friends.
And the timing lines up for when Codswain was being trained, or does it?
I think it lines up for when she would have been first out of the tower, like in her first century of life, because Codswain's like 300, right?
Yeah, so she would have to have been 100 at that point. I thought she was closer to like 40 when she was raised, because she only spent like a decade or two. She spent less than a decade as accepted and less than a decade as novice.
Well, she might have spent 60 years gallivanting around having Codswain adventures before she came across this person in the Black Hills. While he's looking that up, people in chat, check out the shirt that I've got. I've got the SpoilerCon shirt. Yes, SpoilerCon. Get your merch. It's a very comfy shirt, though.
6 years as a novice and 5 as accepted, and she went at 15, which means she was raised to Aes Sedai at 26.
Jesus.
Nynaeve's not much younger than that.
No, Nynaeve is 26, but she came to the tower much later in life.
Much later in life. But yeah, that's interesting that Nyneave and Codswain were raised to Amyrlin at the same age.
Aes Sedai, but yeah.
Yeah, Aes Sedai, thank you.
Yeah, no wonder they see each other as such a threat.
Years ago, fairly soon after she had just attained the Shawl, she suffered a humiliating lesson from a toothless wilder named Norla. That kind of makes it sound like the times don't match up.
And also the Daughters of Silence was too accepted teaching Wilders. So, well, maybe one of the Wilders that got disbanded was Norla. And she was a young woman then. Oh, no, because Codswain would have been a... the times don't work
it's
up.
the other way around. Yeah, nope, they don't.
Well, that's a bummer. I liked that theory.
We're off by about 75 years.
Fuck.
In the wrong direction. Yeah.
So, yeah, we learned that the kin always have 2 or 3 women in Tar Valon. And they approach women who get put out or who are running away. And we've had canon that Laras is part of that. Because...
It has to be.
Yeah, how else would it possibly work?
Also, I like that little nod to Laras by having a Laras equivalent in...
in Enid.
The kitchen over at the Wandering Woman. Yeah, Enid. So, it's hard for me not to think that maybe he was thinking about Laras as that pathway, and that's why Enid got invented and put in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, I like that. Yeah, then we get the first cup being handed to Elayne.
Well, she's like, well, while you're telling me all this knowledge, why don't you go ahead and fetch some tea for the women who are talking? And she doesn't ask for tea for herself, but gets handed the first cup.
She's trying to show deference and courtesy to Adelius and Vandene, and Carridin just falls right into the way Aes Sedai function and includes Elayne in that, which I think is it's good for Elayne that happens, because it helps solidify in her mind what just happened, and then it prompts Vandene to give her this explanation, like, we are a contentious lot in many ways, we Aes Sedai, each jealous of her place and prerogatives. But when someone is placed above us or stands above us, we tend to follow her fairly meekly for the most part. It prompts her to give that comment and sort of explain to Elayne, like, this other secret that she didn't know about how Aes Sedai actually work in practice.
Yeah, I mean, it's how there's not complete chaos in the tower all the time.
Right. You have to respect the chain of command pretty thoroughly, otherwise it will be absolute chaos.
The chain of Quendiar?
It's a lot more breakable than that.
But yeah, so they go, and we hear about how the numbers, like before the Trolloc Wars, first of all, the kin only exists because of the Trolloc Wars, right?
Right.
Because they were distracted during the Trolloc Wars. And also the Trolloc Wars were dangerous, so the kin banded together to protect themselves. But during the Trolloc Wars, or before, 2 out of 3 escaped clean, or 3, that's
a lot.
66 to 75% of runaways just vanished. That is a lot. Now, they had a lot more novices during that time.
Right, but the percentage is still rough. And now with the kin, they retake 9 of 10 That's as near to total omniscience and control as makes no difference.
Yeah, no, and it's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing as a. It's one of the things that is very practical that the Aes Sedai use to increase their mystical reputation. Right, that
We
reputation
will find
of like,
you.
yeah, because we are magical, like, and it's like, or because you have a good spy network.
Yeah, I mean, it's a different kind of magic. But it's one of the most brilliant things that the Tower has ever managed to do, to let the kin exist as a managed release valve.
I guess what bugs me is like, how do you think just 50 women are tracking down every single one of your accepted and runaways?
Oh, they just have a really predictable rotation schedule of always having 50 willing women that never goes up or down.
Yeah, they must have tiny numbers of only 50 all the time. It's just like, are you in...
They underestimate anyone not Aes Sedai.
They really do.
It's
They really
pathetic.
do. It's Aes Sedai arrogance, just all written all over this policies, all over these policies.
Yeah, it's hilarious how they're so smart and so blind at the same time.
And then we just basically get the as always, shift to a POV about Nyneave by having Elayne think about Nyneave. She hoped Nyneave was getting on a 10th so well.
Yes and no.
There's things going on. I mean, she breaks her block. That's great, right?
Yeah, and she gets a husband. So that's a productive afternoon.
She also loses a bunch of soldiers and bodyguards and oarsmen to Balefire.
Yeah.
Bunch of Mat's men.
Alerts Moghedien to where they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag of an afternoon for sure. Yeah, the death and dying part is, at least it's Balefire, so they die before they know they're dead. They don't, like, drown, like Nyneave almost drowns, which is far more horrific than vanishing.
I have to wonder if there are other people who drowned, though, right? Because it went through the middle of the boat, but there are other sections of the boat, right? The front of the boat? Were there people there? She didn't probably balefire all the oarsmen.
Right, yeah. Did she really balefire every single person on the boat other than Nyneave?
Probably not.
Probably not. Some of them may have swum away, some of them may have drowned.
Well, we can get into it, but basically when the balefire hits, and in an instant you were teleported underwater, and you've been underwater for a minute or two, right? Like,
yeah.
it's like, she got lucky that there was a pocket of air. Basically, if there hadn't been that pocket of air, she would have literally just appeared underwater with no air in her lungs.
Yeah.
And there's some interesting conversation to be had about the sinking of the ship.
Because wibbly wobbly timey wimey.
I mean, it comes down to Balefire is unpredictable, and its rules just break the pattern without necessarily like having exactly predictable results, right? Like that's why you can't just Balefire someone to undo everything they've ever done, because some things get undone, but some things don't necessarily, right? Like the slobber from the Darkhound that gets on Matt's arm.
Right, the cascading impacts still exist.
And so in some ways, you're only supposed, by balefying the people, I agree that the ship should have been further back, right? Because the rowers weren't rowing. However, I don't think that the water would have had time to ingress because the souls of the water wasn't affected, right? Like, I believe the ship should have broken apart at the moment it was transported back. It's weird. But I think the physical, what people were doing should have been undone, but what objects were doing should not have.
That's probably the only reason she lives is because the air is like, well, but she would have been breathing. I don't know. We'll get there. First, we need a sedan chair, which people in the video can see. I have an example of a sedan chair behind me. Fancy 18th century lady being carried by two awkward-looking men in a box.
Don't a lot of them have the sedan chairs where you're up on their shoulders rather than being carried sort of down like
yeah,
that?
I found a lot of pictures. It seemed like a lot of the pictures I found, the chair was at that height, so that way it's pretty easy to get in and out of it. But yeah, the weight oftentimes is borne across the shoulders with like a strap, as opposed to being held in the hand, which seems deeply impractical.
Although it also does seem that like lifting them onto your shoulders seems like a bad idea, because then you have all the top heaviness of having the person over your head, and like if they...
Well, that's why you'd have like the strap that comes still down to like hip height, so
Right.
it comes up and over.
Like those furniture carriers that they advertise in late night TV.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so I think they're generally held such that the center of gravity is pretty low. But yeah, I have a hard time imagining that this picture accurately depicts how you would carry a person's weight, because your hands are just not that strong. Like, better to use your whole back and your hips to hold up that much weight.
Although, in fairness, that dude does look like his back is not doing too hot.
Yeah, for sure. It's it doesn't look like a good time, even though that woman probably weighs like 70 pounds because, you know.
But then you got a big freaking wooden box around her with seats and stuff in it that probably weighs, 150 pounds at least. Mm-hmm. It's decorated. It's got curtains. It's got fabric,
it's got couchy cushions inside. Yeah, for sure.
And I'm guessing the dress she's wearing is also not the smallest thing in the world.
For sure. But yeah, so Moghedien's being carried along in one of these, and then she spots Nyneave at a random angle, and I forget which podcast I heard this on, probably Wheel Takes, because they're the main podcast I listen to, but like, Moghedien has a bit of a hate crush on Nyneave to be able to recognize her from the back. Like, okay, you can recognize her from the way she walks from behind. You spent a lot of time studying that figure, Moghedien.
Yeah, I'd push back on that and be like, Nyneave walks like someone who's going to walk through a wall if it gets in her way. Not very many people stalk the way Nyneave stalks. Like, she is bristling and angry and probably one of the few women that walks more like a man.
Mm-hmm. Plus, she's got the braid, which is a very distinctive feature.
And also, like, Moghedien has been imprisoned in her care for 6 months, however long we figured out that was, right? Until very recently, and that then forced her to be mind trapped because of the betrayal and the teaching and everything. Like, literally, Nyneave is the one who caused Moghedien to be mind trapped by capturing her.
Mm-hmm. And she defeated her twice, right? Like, Elayne and Egwene participated, but Nynaeve's the one who just raw strength beat her out.
So there's some, I totally understand why she's obsessed, right? Like, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind that this is a justified obsession.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, she sees her, and immediately all thoughts of self-preservation and rationality and being in the shadows fly out of her head, because kill Nyneave is the uppermost desire in her mind.
And she's on a mission. She says Moghedien's instructions have been explicit. She's going to Phaleon and Ispan to get them to, again, trying to find the cache. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she is there to get that. And she's like, I'll just take a quick detour to commit some really obvious murder. It's fine.
The funny thing is, all she really had to do to find the cache would be watch Nyneave.
Oh my god, right? She could have just... But yeah, she's not thinking straight. She's in the throes of an all-consuming hatred. And
oh, she's definitely not thinking straight.
She's not thinking straight on multiple levels.
Yes. What was that about a hate crime?
Yeah. I mean, someone beats you twice, like, your feelings are going to become complicated, even if it's mostly hate.
I want to make a sports analogy here, but I don't know an appropriate one.
Something sports ball. I don't know.
Yeah, sports ball, 2 teams. Boston, New York. I'm going to go with that.
I know less about sports than you, so I'll go with it. She makes her sedan chair stop and runs away, not worrying about them leaving, because, of course, she has compulsed bearers who will stand there till they starve to death.
But, okay, I have a problem with that. They won't starve to death. They'll die of dehydration long before they starve to death.
True.
Or muscle collapse or something, right? Like, fatigue and just standing there, like, your body will fail long before you die of hunger.
Accurate. They will dehydrate to death before they starve.
Yes. Just a thought. I was like, Moghedien, come on. You've killed enough people that way. You know.
I mean, hunger, it's something, it's sustenance that goes in your mouth. Hunger, thirst, whatever. It's all the same to her. Mere human flesh.
I am curious if she's ever, I bet she has compelled someone to be like, yeah, you don't ever get to eat again.
Probably.
Go about your life.
Yeah.
I guess that's just giving someone an eating disorder.
Yeah. But that does seem like the kind of thing she would do, just to be petty. Well, Semirog would be the one who did it experimentally.
Totally.
Moghedien would be the one who just did it as a petty move.
Right. Although there's a good point here that she says she's not that good at compulsion.
How much simpler her life would be if she had been. Yeah.
Because I'm thinking the one thing that led to all of this, right, is when she tried to compel Nyneave and Elayne to give her information, and then they remembered.
Well, Nyneave remembered. And in the dream, at that.
There is, sure. But I'm thinking that maybe part of the reason that she was able to, whereas Grendel if Grendel had gotten her hands on her, she never would have remembered.
Right, yeah.
Is that Moghedien is just not as good at compulsion as someone like Grendel.
Right, she's one of those musicians that can play like according to the sheet music and exactly by the beat, but there's not quite any heart in it, whereas Grendel can like jam.
I always thought the same thing about Ravine. Is like he likes using compulsion, but it's just like he's just not that good at it.
He's got his favorite moves, and that's good enough.
Yeah, and he always has to like re-up it. Like that was always weird, is he had to like re-up it on Morghese occasionally. I'm guessing because he didn't want to mess with her brain too much, so he would just like would tie off a weave instead of like embedding it deep in her consciousness, maybe something like that.
And he's also like really lackadaisical. Like he was very like minimal effort Forsaken.
Figures. Dude wants to date the most beautiful woman in the world, but doesn't want to put any effort in for it.
Yeah, right? He's just like, I'm just going to do whatever works, and that's fine. And I think Moghedien has a similar approach. I mean, she was like, what, a charlatan insurance salesman or something in the Age of Legends? Like, doing the bare minimum is the thing, and then you don't develop skill. Whereas Grendel and Semirog are both very interested in using their skills and building on skills beyond the power and supplementing the power with other talents. Like, some of them just try harder than others. But yeah, she throws a bunch of needles of air to make people get out of the way, which is remarkably benign for her.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think during the 80s, there was people who go, I mean, it was a terrible thing, but people go around and take a needle and stab a bunch of people in a crowd.
Ugh.
And it was particularly horrifying because HIV was a thing. And so it was like, people would get these, and you couldn't know, right? It took 6 months to even get a test result back, right? So people would just be horrified that someone was going around just basically giving people AIDS in a crowd with a needle.
Or just making them think they got AIDS, because social terror is super cool.
It's super cool. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, this sort of reminds me of that, and just like, but then of course, I guess this is more sanitary because she's using a separate needle of air for everybody. Like,
yeah,
yay.
Yeah. I mean, she's just in it to make them move out of her way. That's the only reason she's doing this. It's not to actually do anything to them per se.
But I have to wonder how many are seriously wounded by the stabbing, because she's not being gentle about it.
No, I mean, if something like stabs into like one of your major arteries, like you could end up suddenly bleeding out for no fucking reason, like, or like perforates your stomach, like.
But she is saying like she doesn't want to leave corpses. Like she talks about that as well. So.
Right. It's probably a bunch of like thumbtack sized or length stabs. And she marches into this inn, looking like a raven.
Yeah, the Dark One's eyes.
Yeah, I love the description of her costume. This like beautiful mask and this like beautiful black and red dress, and she's just like, I will literally murder everybody in this room for seeing me in fucking livery. But yeah, no, the Dark One's eyes, I hadn't even thought of it as being like that. I thought it was just Moghedien being weird. But no, you're right. Literally the Dark One's eyes.
With the Kasuvra, I think Moghedien can look through her eyes at any time.
Oh, can he?
And he thinks of them. We don't really know the abilities of the Kasuvra, but that's sort of my assumption when she says he could be there at any time.
Mm.
You know, it's not necessarily that he will appear, but like by holding the Kasuvra, he can get an idea. Like he could look through her eyes and see what's going on, right? He's got that. Because like the Kasuvra, if you break it, you can literally control them like an automaton. So there has to be a way for you to see what they're seeing, hear what they're hearing.
Yeah, if you like hold on to it and like think about it, you can like get like sort of a shadow image of what's going on even without breaking it. Yeah, I could buy that. Plus a location. Definitely. I feel like what she's
definitely
saying.
A location.
Definitely a location. But yeah, probably at least an impression of what they're doing if you like hold it and think about it. And then if you crush it, then you have them completely. He literally has eyes out there, and she just marches in like, hi, I'm an evil black bird, don't think anything of it.
I think it's sad that she uses the oarsman's pride to balefire a bunch of oarsmen.
Oh, that is sad.
It's like, oh.
And you know that those guys were mostly locals.
Totally. They probably were at the bar.
Like the guards were mats, but like the oarsmen were probably just like, part of the oarsmen's guild. Yeah, oarsman's pride is where they go to relax after work. And
one of the things that does bug me is how little thought Nyneave puts towards the people who are on the ship. I wish that was an earlier thought. I wish it was something she expressed more remorse about.
Yeah.
Or more anger about.
Most of her anxiety around that comes around hiding it from Matt, not the fact that 15 plus people died. Yeah. It's out of character for her to not have remorse about that. Yeah.
And I think we just end up in we're in the stage of the series where we have unnamed goons who are dying all the time, and, like...
They're just some red shirts.
Yeah, they're just some red shirts, and, like, I think that's just an effect of the story, and this isn't meant to have a major... The emotional impact is supposed to be her breaking her block, not feeling guilt about death.
Yeah.
And she does sort of dismiss it like, that was Moghedien, right? Like, Moghedien struck, there's nothing I could have done about it.
But contrast that to her reaction to Brigida getting ripped out of the dream world.
Right.
Yeah, I guess it's because it's men and they signed up for that, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, but the oarsmen didn't. They're just civilians.
Well, they're still men.
They're just workers.
And, only people with uteruses need to be protected obsessively.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. But for now, Moghedien weighs up the dangers of killing versus brainwashing the innkeeper who leads her up to the roof. Because, she doesn't mind killing, but corpses are harder to hide than people who are just a little off.
Right. Yeah, which makes a lot of sense to me, right? Like, oh, you don't remember yesterday? That's weird. No one's gonna, like... But you come around and you ask, hey, do you know anyone who has some memory problems? Like, yeah. Like, what's that? But if you go, do you know anyone who died recently? Oh, yes, absolutely. I can point towards the deaths, So, like, I can see where there are things that are pointed.
Yeah, no, for sure. But, she probably, like, drops this woman's IQ quite significantly because she just slams rough, compulsion on her. This is eminently not a compassionate act. It's a hiding act, which is hilarious when she sends a bar of liquid fire from the roof. It's like, yeah, real subtle there.
She's not thinking straight.
No, she's
not.
She's
definitely in a panic.
Right, because she's half furious and half terrified. There's 0 brain cells left for being rational.
I think there's a fair amount of, if we want to go into the PTSD here, right? Like, she goes to Balefire, the reason she misses, some pigeons fluttered away. And she reacts like someone flinching, like that, very much someone with trauma flinching at a stimulus that would normally be fine for anyone else.
Arguably, birds' wings are always way bigger than you think they should be compared to the body of the bird. I find birds very startling.
And maybe it's common trope, but the idea of, like, the slow motion, like, she goes to Balefire, you're like, oh no, again, cinematic, Nyneave's about to die, and then slow motion pigeons and her, like, panic as the thing goes flying off,
I like it. But, I do agree that she's definitely got a lot of trauma coming out because her thought process is Moghedien is here. Her thought process is not, someone's shooting an arrow at me. It's Moghedien is here.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
And yeah, she's been just nothing but traumatized for the past several months. And now something is startling her. Like, she's already up to here with her tension, and then something startles her.
And also, she's been raped repeatedly, like, recently. Like, we talk about, like, the trauma that Matt suffers, the trauma that Moghedien suffers, right?
Right, and
like,
her soul is now held in the hand of someone who has taken the place of her rapist. Yeah, she's got every reason to be very, very reactionary and traumatized in this moment. But I gotta think that the reason that the pigeons fluttered up in her face was ta'veren, because if Nyneave dies, then how's Rand gonna cleanse the source? Maybe it's just pigeons, but if Nyneave dies, how does Rand cleanse the source?
Yeah, not well.
So I tend to attribute the pigeons to ta'veren. And it's a city. Those pigeons are everywhere. It's not like it's hard it's not like a huge twist to make that happen. The Bowl of the Winds could have still been found and used without Nyneave, but the cleansing wouldn't have happened.
Nyneave's just so key to everything.
Yeah. Not to mention bringing the Machieri together for the last battle, which wouldn't happen without Lan and Nyneave together. So, sorry, Moghedien, you're going against fate. No matter how much trauma you have, that's not going to override the overarching need of the world. I wonder if any pigeons got bale-fired. If any of them flew into the beam.
If she bale-fired all the pigeons, would they not have distracted her, causing them not to get bale-fired?
That's getting into, like, Back to the Future territory.
And this is very much, this paragraph is Back to the Future territory. This is, because the slice from the boat center had gone at the same time the boatsman really died, the river had minutes to rush in. And this is where I disagree, because when we see things like, if you bale-fire a column, the middle disappears, and then the column falls. Mm-hmm. Inanimate objects shouldn't react to being bale-fired until after the bale-fire. It's only people. It's only the rowers that should have been. So everything should have moved back because the rowers weren't doing anything.
But still been on top of the water.
But still been on top of the water. And only at that moment should the middle have disappeared, and then it should have started sinking, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I've kind of always skipped past the water had minutes to rush in part. I kind of just always mentally skipped past that because it makes no sense, right? So you just scoot the boat back up the river, remove the middle, and then time resumes.
That's what I think should be happening, not I killed the men and the middle was cut out minutes ago. Right? The middle wasn't cut out minutes ago.
Unless we decide that the water is alive and it's affected that way. maybe there's animism, like...
Maybe it's full of living, or there's this bunch of bacteria and living creatures in there, or maybe somehow that causes the effects.
I don't like it.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
No. So this is something I've always had a bit of a problem with. I always thought that the boat shouldn't have already sunk.
Yeah. I do think it would sink very fast. This is not a Titanic compartmentalized kind of structure. It would take very little time for the half to sink, given the slice.
And that's why I think the two parts of the boat sank out of sight in a great froth of bubbles, right? That seems to make sense to me. If they started off on top, they would sink very quickly.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's it's almost contradictory, right? Because she's saying they have minutes to rush in, and at the same time, it's sinking as she's watching.
Yeah, I agree. It's a both and, which doesn't make sense linearly. So we'll just eliminate one of those lines.
I'm headcanoning that it was on the water and sunk very quickly, and she's just wrong about the water having had time to rush in.
And it's a very confusing moment, so it's not like Nynaeve's POV contradicts this headcanon.
Not necessarily.
Because it's just like there's a rush of power, everything's confusing, and then when she comes to, she's at the bottom. And yeah, otherwise it's like she would have used up all the air in the minutes that the water was rushing in. Because she runs out of air in 2 minutes while she's digging
she has a couple
around
of
down
breaths.
there. Yeah, so it's like she would have already been passed out if minutes had gone by. So no, minutes didn't go by. No, sorry, Jordan.
And there's also just balefire can be weird like that. I think would be his answer. Is it doesn't work the same way twice.
Yeah.
Maybe one time the boat would have been above the water, one time the boat would have been under the water. The pattern got yanked, and what ended up happening is a bit of a, uncontrolled, chaotic Dark One mess.
And the Dark One does want to get to the final confrontation with Rand, so chaos is going to work out such that Nynaeve has a chance to escape. And then she realizes that was a big glowing beacon
idea.
on top of a building that even people who can't channel are going to notice. And it's just yeah, that was a bad call. Not very Spider-like.
It is. We never see a follow-up on that, though. No, she's never punished for doing anything like that. No one ever, questions.
No one ever comments on it, even. None of the kin ever comment on the weird flash of balefire or anything. There's no rumors about, lightning striking a building which bounced to a boat. Zero follow-up on that. Just too fast, I guess.
I think that possibly because the Seanchan invade shortly thereafter. That basically, they go and get the bowl, right, today, don't they?
I believe so. It's either today or tomorrow. No, it's tomorrow. Because Nynaeve and Lan have a wedding night.
That's right, on the boat.
Yeah.
That's right.
So
they get it tomorrow, and they use it pretty much right away. They go out to
yeah, either that day or the next day. So yeah, the Seanchan are 36, 48 hours away from landing.
That's pretty much what I'm thinking, yeah. So right after the Festival of the Birds, they show up.
So yeah, there's no time for rumors of this to really manifest. It was a flash of weirdness, 17 people die, and then the Seanchan show up, and
then there's a lot more flashes of weirdness and a lot more people die.
Right. So, yeah, the families of those oarsmen are we're just starting to process our trauma, and oh, wow, now we're under invasion. So, yeah, it's a weird lack of follow-up and also not weird. I can buy that's, yeah, there's just too much going on shortly after that. But, yeah, she runs back down through the building and forgets to even needle stab people to get them out of her way because she's so much working from terrified trauma brain rather than angry trauma brain, and runs away to get Phalion and Ispan and hope that Moghedien doesn't care what she did.
So Phalion and Ispan ambush the girls when they get the Bowl of the Winds. They're there waiting for them with the golem.
I don't know about with the golem. The golem might just show up on his own.
That's a good question. I thought they were with the golem because the golem's under the command of the Forsaken. They're under the command of the Forsaken.
The golem gets sent to Carridin. Remember, I will send you someone to deal with them.
And he wants you dead almost as much as he wants her.
And Phalion and Ispan are not working with Carridin.
I thought they were.
when does that scene happen? Where Elayne goes to him and like calls him a dog and all of that. That's still in the future yet, right?
I mean, don't they get captured with the Bowl of the Winds and killed shortly thereafter?
Only Ispan does. Only Ispan gets captured. Elayne gets away. I think it must be after that she goes to Carridin, and I'm not positive though. Because if she has made contact with Carridin before this, then I do think the golem's there with them, just watching the back or something like that. Okay, so Samael sends the golem to help Carridin deal with the Aes Sedai who are looking for the thing. Elayne and Ispan are working to find the bowl because Moghedien sets them to do it. Even before she shows up again here, they're here working on her behalf to find it. So I think the golem and the Black Aja are not working together.
Why does she think there is a cache there? Why did she send them to find that cache?
I don't think we ever get an explanation for that. I'm assuming the same kind of research that Samael was conducting. Because he says, I've tracked them, traced them. I know that there's a stash here. Presumably, Moghedien was able to find that information on her own as well.
So it does appear that we have two groups, one sent by Moghedien and one sent by
Samael.
However, right now I think Moghedien might be controlling both of them.
Is Moghedien controlling Samael? Because last time we saw Moghedien and Samael, that was the Watcher.
Yeah, that's
spying
true. And he did send the golem, and I do think the golem went after Fel, Heard Fel, on the orders of Samael. I know Moghedien takes control of the golem later, but he may not have control of him yet.
Yeah, I don't think so yet. So yeah, it's just a coincidence of everyone converging on the bowl at the same time because multiple parties are interested in that storehouse.
Well, that'll be interesting to explore exactly who's waiting when we get there. Yeah, but okay, that was a lot of speculation just to be like, oh yeah, two different groups.
Yep.
Okay.
No, I mean it's very complicated, so we had to go there.
And sometimes we find connections we didn't expect when we go there. So I think that's good. Anything else you wanted to say on this one?
No, it's a fairly straightforward chapter if you stick to the text and don't get caught up in speculation.
Yeah, and it leads wonderfully into the next chapter, Mashieri, which will also be another wonderful chapter without me, although I do need to contact our guests, which I have not done yet.
Yeah, but yeah, so Lan is on a boat. He has made it to Ebudar, and he is following. He's not on a boat yet, but he sees the balefire. He sees which boat it strikes, and he grabs the nearest boat that was on its way out of dock anyway and says, "Follow that boat," and goes out to rescue her. So he is on the docks, right now.
Nyneave, I was right behind your boat. I saw what happened. You were 50 paces ahead of me and then 50 paces behind, sinking. It had to be balefire. So he's on a boat following her.
So he did a Moghedien and was like, "I know that braid," and is following her. So yeah, he's on a boat in the river as we speak, as we close this chapter. And he's about to make her and a whole bunch of the fandom very, very happy.
Very, very happy. Super excited that John is back from his vacation. So
Hallelujah.
Get caught up on editing there. But yeah, so just we were talking about this briefly before I clicked on recording, but I've moved. This will be my first recording in a new studio space, which should hopefully be a little more higher quality. I don't think I'm gonna. My last space had some fans outside, which I'm sure you've heard me talk about once or twice, industrial fans outside, so I'm hoping that's not going to be an issue. I also disabled 2 of the fans in my computer case.
Oh.
Because it's a Hackintosh and not a real computer. The software doesn't control the fans, it just spins them at 100% all the time.
Oh.
So it doesn't. So that's partially where some of the fan noise was coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a massive case designed to cool a ridiculous system, and I don't push it that hard. I couldn't figure out how to slow the fans down, but I could disable a couple of them just by unplugging them.
So in theory, you're going to be less tinny from now on because you'll be removing less fan noise.
Exactly. Yeah.
From two different sources.
Two different sources. Yeah. So that, and then, you know, a part of me, I still want to buy a nice one of the new MacBook Airs that has 0 fans and could totally handle this and switch over to using that, because fan noise really is what it comes down to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a good time. Even if you can't really tell that it's there or not, like, your subconscious can tell. Your ears are hearing it.
Well, and just the tinniness that comes through in the recording. You know, I want to do everything I can to increase the quality of the recording, you know, and like, there's a limit and there's diminishing returns, and we've mostly hit those, but there is a level higher we could go with a slightly better soundproof room with a slightly better mic that would make a difference, I think, in the end product.
So stay tuned for that subtle difference.
So yeah, hopefully you're hearing me a little bit better right now. Hopefully this is slightly less tinny, and in the future I may buy myself a new mic. I'll get rid of the fan noise entirely, and then I'm just going to sound like I'm in an actual studio.
Welcome to NPR.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers Podcast. So yeah, last episode sounded great.
I mean, I hope so. You know, it's really hard to know what you're actually making when you're in the throes of making it. But I had a good time. Gus had a good time. We had 2 hours of productive conversation. And yeah, hopefully people enjoy what we had to say.
And thanks for taking on that while I was moving, because I've been a crazy person lately.
Yeah, it was good. I mean, there's lots that happens in that chapter. There's a whole beggar attack, and you know, stuff happened. I think it was a really productive conversation because Gus is a smart dude, and we talked about it a lot beforehand. So I was glad we were able to take that off of your hands with you
Gus
having
is
everything.
Fantastic as always.
Yeah, Gus is great, and yeah, not many people showed up in the audience, but those that were there had a good time, I think. And yeah, I'm curious to see what fallout we do or don't get from telling the world that RJ wrote trauma really well.
Yeah, you know, I think there's a certain depth that we approach this at that a surface or even a casual reading or even an interested reading can miss. Just because how else do you put in 4 years of work to get to this point in understanding RJ's writing, right? Like, you have to put in a lot of work before you can even understand exactly what he's trying to do.
But here we are at episode 375.
375. Whew.
Yeah. Yeah, the commitment to sparkle motion is quite real in this podcast.
Sparkle motion?
Yeah, from Donnie Darko.
I've seen Donnie Darko, but I don't know the reference.
You haven't seen Donnie Darko? Okay, well, remember the asshole bitch teacher that's in charge of the daughter's dance group? She says something to the effect of, like, I'm beginning to doubt your commitment to sparkle motion to the mom, because the mom has to, like, take care of her son and, like, doesn't want to, like, go, like, she doesn't want to chaperone the group to their, like, dance meet or something. And this is after he told her to forcibly insert the pamphlet up her rectum. And then she's like, I'm beginning to doubt your commitment to sparkle motion. So, yeah.
It has been a minute, yeah.
Yeah, so that's become a bit of a meme that my husband and I pass around, being like, you know, where is your commitment to sparkle motion in a given situation? So what I'm trying to say is that this podcast has really done a lot of work and been around for a while. And it's cool because we have a following and we've prompted people to make art. I mean, that's something that Gus directly credits with his podcast, is the fact that What Spoilers, like, made him think, oh, there is the concept of making Wheel of Time podcast content, is like, that's a thing you can do. And lots of people have done that.
And I'm always happy to inspire people who can look at my work and say, oh, yeah, I can definitely do that. That's not that hard. That guy can do it.
Oh, yeah. Like, or the whole, like, you know, that guy sucks. I can do it better.
Uh-huh.
That's a fun one.
That is a fun one.
But, you know, there's a lot of people out there who took What Spoilers as an inspiration to start their content. And that's pretty neat because now there's a fuck ton of it out there.
It really is. And then how much of the content that wasn't directly inspired by What Spoilers was inspired by someone who's inspired by What Spoilers,
mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
It's What Spoilers all the way down. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. You've created quite the catalyst. And it's fun that I get to be part of it now.
Yeah, well, you're keeping it going for sure.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or
support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?